Welcome. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar hosted by the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations. My name is Victor Trinidad with NCPMI. This webinar is part of the Within the Framework webinar series, and it's titled From Data to Decisions, Using the New Behavior Incident Report System Features to Address the Exclusionary Discipline, presented by Myrna Vigilla Figueroa and Megan von der Ems. We thank you very much, and please proceed.
Thank you, Victor. Good afternoon. My name is Myrna Vigilla Figueroa, and I'm here with my colleague, Megan von der Ems. We are both staff of NCPMI based out of the University of South Florida. Today, we are so excited to share with you the updates to the Behavior Incident Report System and to share a new resource that can be used within the updated system to enhance the data decision-making process. So many of you who are using the BIRS already are likely wondering about the revisions. You're likely wondering why we made changes, what those changes are, and how they might impact the system that you're using now. Today, we'll go through what these changes are and how they will help you and your team with data analysis. It's important, and I kind of want to put that up front, is that the changes are mainly to the BIRS Excel workbook and not necessarily the measure itself. As Victor mentioned, if at any point you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A panel. We hope to have some time at the end of this webinar to address those questions.
Thanks, Myrna, for getting us started today. So as Myrna said, at NCPMI, we've been focused on updating the BIRS in ways that help us improve our data collection and our decision-making. The changes reflect that ongoing need to collect data and use data around behavior incidents. And we really want to focus on how we collect and use that data in our responses. So we're going to be focused on kind of that exclusionary practice part today. But Myrna, will you walk us through some of those influencing factors so people can understand kind of why the changes to the BIRS occurred?
Sure. So we're going to start off by grounding ourselves in what we know about the use of exclusionary discipline in early childhood settings and what we can do to improve the use of these practices. So data from the Office of the Civil Rights data collection continue to indicate that exclusionary discipline disproportionately affects certain groups of children enrolled in public preschool programs. Despite national recognition of this problem since the very first preschool data collection in 2011-2012, the most recent data collection of 2021-2022 continues to indicate disproportionality in suspensions for not only Black or African American preschool children, which we know has been a continuous issue, but now also for American Indian or Alaskan Native children and children of 2 or more races. Black or African American children, white children, and children of 2 or more races were also disproportionately expelled. When looking at gender, preschool boys represented 54% of enrollment, but 81% of children who received 1 or more out-of-school suspensions, and 84% of children who were expelled. Preschool children with disabilities served under IDEA represented 23% of preschool enrollment, but 41% of preschool children who received 1 or more out-of-school suspensions, and 74% of children who were expelled. So we know that the problem has persisted over time. Removing children from their educational settings can have negative short-term and long-term effects on children's social, emotional, and academic development. We know that children who are excluded lose valuable time in instruction, their access to peers, and opportunities to build relationships and social, emotional knowledge and skills are cut short. Removal of a child from the classroom can negatively affect their relationships with adults and with peers. This might affect their trust in the adult, and children might start to see that the child who is excluded is not a full member of the classroom community. Further, we know that exclusion in the early years can predict further expulsions and suspensions in the future. Despite what we know we know that there's no simple solution to this problem. The use of exclusionary discipline practices is really a multidimensional issue. We know of what are those factors that can lead to this use of these practices, and we know the characteristics of the groups of children who are more likely to experience them. And in this document that was published by the Children's Equity Project in 2022, a holistic framework was described outlining how to approach eliminating exclusionary discipline. We acknowledge it takes more than changing a policy or just training teachers. What we do know from the research base is that suspension and expulsion are less likely in programs implementing the pyramid model. A study by Clayback and Hemeter in 2019-2020 demonstrated that center-wide use of the pyramid model strategies were associated with significantly fewer expulsions. Programs that have integrated early childhood mental health consultation also have lower rates of expulsion and suspension. We also know that teachers' well-being is strongly linked to the use of exclusionary practice. We continue to see in literature indications that efforts that use multiple elements in addressing these practices are seeing success in eliminating and preventing exclusionary discipline. Our message is that the use of exclusionary discipline is harmful, it's ineffective, and it affects certain groups of children disproportionately. Programs can make a difference through data collection and data-informed decision-making, guiding and supporting practitioners to use effective strategies, implementing an MTSS, coaching, and providing behavior support. Today, we'll specifically look at the behavior incident report system and how the updates that we've made today can lead to improved data collection and decision-making. So likely all of you who are here today are familiar with the BIR and have been using it for some time. So you're familiar with what it is and the data that it collects. But for those of you who might be new to the system and maybe aren't using it yet, the Behavior Incident Report System is one of the tools that programs can use to track and analyze behavior incidents that are a concern to a teacher. The BIR system includes a form for recording behavior incidents that exceed what's developmentally expected. It includes an Excel workbook to enter data from these forms that generates tables and charts to analyze data at the program, classroom, and individual child level. The workbook also helps to identify potential disproportionality so that programs know what is occurring in their program. This tool helps programs make data-informed decisions on how to best support children and teachers and make changes for program improvement. So now Megan will take us through some of the changes to the BIR form.
Right. As Myrna mentioned, if you're familiar with the BIR form, the primary changes are to the workbook and not to the tool itself, the BIR form. But we did want to highlight some small changes that were made that were really around accurate data collection. So the changes, the feature changes include those in the demographic section of the BIR form. And so I invite you to, if you haven't downloaded the new form or look at it, at the bottom of the form, you'll notice that there's a prefer not to respond category and a Middle Eastern or North African as a race category. So those are new additions. But we also recognize that not everyone on today's webinar is completely familiar with the BIR form. It might be new to you. So I just want to highlight some of those key features of the BIR form. So what you're looking at now is the actual form that teachers use to track behavior incidents. The fields for data collection really match what you would see in an early childhood classroom or environment. So there's activities like diapering, circle time, rest, and nap, and the behaviors that little ones engage with, things like disruption, tantrums, inconsolable crying. So they really fit our early childhood settings. Teachers record their responses to incidents. The form is meant to be quick. It's a way to track kind of those critical features of the behavior incident Takes about a minute maximum to complete. And as you look at the form and what's recorded, it's important to remember that what's being measured by using the BIR form, it's a child incident of behavior that teacher finds concerning, or it exceeds what's developmentally appropriate. And we have training, so if you're new to the BIR form, there are things available that help practitioners, trainings and resources know how and when to complete a BIR form. And at the end of today's webinar, we'll direct you to where you can access all of the information around the BIR form. The form, if you noticed, includes adult and administrative responses, so responses to adult behavior. And the form does include some exclusionary and potentially harmful responses to behavior. Myrna set us up today thinking about how important it is that we are thinking carefully and critically about the responses around exclusionary practices in our programs. So we don't include these responses because we condone them, but because they happen. And we want programs to have a systematic and accurate way of collecting these data so that we can make informed decisions. And you might be thinking, or I often hear programs that say, like, we don't do those, it's against our policy or guidelines, or we have regulations that prohibit us from using things like in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension. But that responses are there on the form. So if it does happen, you'll know, and your program can use this information to move forward an action plan. As part of the BIR system, we include operational definitions of all responses on the BIR form. And this is an important feature in the BIRS in the system, is the ability to capture data that we can use for problem solving and planning. And when things happen like an exclusionary response, what you'll notice on the form, there isn't a place that says in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension. What we are completing on the form is the adult response. So a teacher response of perhaps time in a different classroom or adult outside the classroom, or an administrative response that you see listed here in 6, 7, and 8. And so what we know is that when those adult responses occur that are exclusionary, they're calculated in the system, in the Excel workbook that we're going to walk through in a minute. They're calculated as an in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, or an expulsion. For example, if an administrator's response to an incident of challenging behavior is sending the child home for the remainder of the day, this would then be calculated in the system as an out-of-school suspension. And the last part, we want you to think about the form and how it relates to what we're going to walk through in terms of updates to the Excel workbook, is really thinking about what the BIR can measure. And so you have two parts. So you're looking at your behavior incident frequency across the program, classrooms, and child level, and you're analyzing it by the different factors or categories you see on the form. So types of behavior, activity, motivation, who's involved, and so forth. And so you get that type of information. And you're also able to look at measures of disproportionality for behavior incident frequency in general. So we can start thinking about, are there certain groups of children with more BIRs than others? And then we can look at incidents that result in suspension or expulsion. So are we suspending certain groups of children more than others? And as long as you enter that demographic information on the BIR form for the program and for each child, you have access to those analytic elements. And while there were just those minor changes to demographics on the BIR form, I imagine that people are most curious, Myrna, about the changes to the actual workbook. So Myrna's going to take us through the major changes and give us a snapshot of what those changes look like.
So if you go on to the next slide, Megan, we've put up kind of what are those major updates to the BIR, the version 3.0. So in the program information tab, we updated the race category to include Middle Eastern or North African. We also added a prefer not to respond category. So we heard from programs that sometimes you don't have that information for all of the children in your program. There might be parents or families who prefer not to respond. And so or even children who might fall into other categories that are not listed on the BIR. And so we have this prefer not to respond category that now is this catch-all for those, for families who prefer not to respond, for the others, and for unknown. We also made changes to the program summary. We updated some of the chart formatting so that the charts have a little bit of a cleaner look. We added a summary by day of the week. So we also heard that we would like to know if are there more incidents on certain days of the week than on others. So that's a new change as well. And we also added a filter by month because the program summary, for those of you who have been using the BIR, the program summary was a year-to-date summary. And a lot of times that would not change from month to month. It would be very small increases in percentage. So we added a filter by month so that you could actually just pull up your summary for the month that you were looking at data. We also removed individual tabs. So we had a tab for each one of those categories on the BIR form: problem behavior, motivation, who's involved. And we replaced that with a new analysis by category tab that has everything that these other tabs had before and helps you get to better data analysis, more accurate. We also added filters, so more filters so that you could filter by what day of the week, if that was something of interest to you, or by a certain time, if you were thinking more incidents or were seeing more incidents at a certain time of day. We also added an exclusionary discipline tab because the versions before this one didn't really call that out in a way that we wanted to. We want to make sure that you have that you know whether this is occurring in your program and that you can identify easily which children are experiencing exclusionary discipline. We also removed the tab that was in the versions 2 and that was distribution by ID. And so that was kind of like this catch-all. If you had a question about something, you could go in there and identify whether that was occurring across many classrooms or certain classrooms and certain children. So I'm going to show you within the Excel, I'm going to go live into it and show you where these changes are so that you can see what these new features are. All right, so the new Excel version 3.0. On the instruction tab, everything pretty much here has remained very similar. I did take out the data entry tutorial from the using the tabs tutorial. I separated it into two. So if you have someone who's only doing data entry, they can just watch that short 15-minute video of how you would enter data and set up your workbook. And then I added the tutorial on using the tabs, so on using the filters and looking at data. On this tab, I also consolidated another tab that we had, that was the data entry and quality checklist. So this used to be on its own separate tab, and I just moved this over here. We still want you to think about your data quality, because as you know, your data quality impacts your data analysis. So these are still things that we want you to keep in mind as you're entering data and as you are reviewing BIR forms. So this is the change pretty much to that instruction tab. The program information tab has pretty much stayed the same. You're still entering your teacher names, classroom IDs, and your enrollment by month. The addition here is that prefer not to respond category for all of these. So by ethnicity, race, sex, IFSP, IEP, and whether they're a dual language learner status. Again, it's meant to be a catch-all. So for children you don't know children where families preferred not to respond, and others. So you would use that as a category so that your numbers are more accurate as far as your enrollment in your program. You'll see the Middle Eastern or North African group here for race as well. And then that's pretty much the change here on the program information tab. The child enrollment tab has not changed. It has changed. It is pretty much the same. You're using drop downs to select your responses for each child in which you enroll into the system for which you have a BIR. So that hasn't changed. And then the data entry hasn't changed. So data entry still continues to be the same. You're still using one row for one BIR, and you're entering all of the data that you have on your form. So that the entry has not changed either. The program summary is where we see one of the bigger changes. You'll see that the data visualizations are a little bit cleaner, elimination of grid lines of the y-axes. You have some data labels, making it a little bit easier to read and to share. I still encourage you to highlight things when you're sharing data to make changes to your charts if you want to, but we've cleaned those up a bit. On the program summary, like I mentioned before, you get a year-to-date view, but you can, if you're focusing on a very specific month, you are able to just filter by that 1 month, and then everything after this filter will filter for that specific month. So you're able to do that and bring to your programs during your team meetings. Here's our data for this month. As you see, there is the day of the week chart that will give you information about, are we experiencing more BIRs on certain days? As long as you've entered the date correctly, Excel will calculate what date of the week it is. I also, if you scroll all the way up, you're also going to see tables for all of these charts. And so that is just another way for you to share data. So if you don't, you can't share a one of the bar charts, you can definitely share one of the tables. All of this data is here for you to use with your program. But as far as the program information tab, those are pretty much the changes to that. Monthly BIRs by Classroom ID is another tab that changed a little bit. What we did was we added more filters. Before, you only had a filter for the month and for the classroom, but now we've added filters for all of those other factors that are on the form. So if you wanted to know where a specific behavior was occurring, or at a specific activity that behavior was occurring, you can identify which classroom, get details on the year to date, how many incidents, but you can also scroll down and see what that looks like month by month. And you can see which children in that classroom. So you get a lot of information from this one tab. If your question is answering where is behavior occurring the most and with which children. So this gives you a lot of that information all in one. If you were familiar with the version 2.0, this will look familiar to you, because this is what would have been on the distribution by Classroom ID tab. The monthly BIRs by Child ID tab has not really changed much. We just added a couple of filters, time of day, day of the week, and pretty much everything has stayed the same on this tab as well. Now, the biggest change is the analysis by category. Now, this tab is a consolidation of all of those individual tabs. And what you have here is your year-to-date number and percentage of incidents by each category. So you can answer those questions of what is occurring the most. But then you've also have a month-by-month view, where you can see if you're interested in digging deeper into that one incident or one type of any of these categories. So if I'm interested in knowing more about physical aggression, I can see what that looks like over time. Not only that, it helps me see where is physical aggression occurring, with whom, what's the motivation, and you can use any number of filters in order to get to where you where you want to be, whatever the question is that you want to know. So if I'm interested in knowing more about physical aggression, I could use this filter that will then start to filter things out for me. I can see, is my physical aggression going up over time? Is it going down? I can see where physical aggression occurs the most. It occurs the most in centers. I can see with whom, and so on and so forth. And I have all of these filters that I can use. And Megan later on will take us through how we can use these filters effectively with our data. So you're getting that year-to-date view, but you are also looking at it over time. So that's the analysis by category. So you've got all of the same charts. So nothing is missing, others involved, motivation, response, administrative follow-up. And now you've also got the time of day. So now you can also go down even deeper to say, well, physical aggression is occurring most at that 11 a.m. time. So it's giving you a lot of detail as far as data goes. So if you love data, you've got a lot here, and you've got it in multiple formats. So you've got your tables, your pie charts, your bar charts, and even that bar chart is in a table. You just have different ways to present that data to your team and different filters that you can use. We also added a new tab, the exclusionary discipline tab. So exclusionary discipline tab calls out those exclusionary responses. If we call out the response, we tell you what type of response that is on the form. So timeout, time in a different classroom are all classroom responses, teacher responses to behavior. Being sent home, conditional enrollment, reduced hours are also exclusionary responses that are on the administrative portion of the BIR form. In here, we're charting how many incidents are occurring per month. So this isn't about how many children, but how many incidents are occurring. So we can say here in September, there was one incident where a child was sent home for the remainder of the day, 2 incidents where a child was sent home for 1 or more days, and so on. So it gives us an idea of what's happening in over time. And if we're trying to not use these responses, which is, I hope that's the case, that we will see that over time, if we are using these responses, that we are decreasing, we're decreasing those. So you've got that in the table form, but you've also got that in a chart form. And then you're able to identify which children are experiencing exclusionary discipline. So if I'm interested in knowing which children are receiving an out-of-school suspension, I can come here, unselect 0, and I can see that there are 3 children who have had some sort of being sent home. This particular child has had 2 incidents where they have had an out-of-school suspension. And so by using this here, we're able to identify who those children are. So that is how the exclusionary discipline tab, and how we hope that you would look at this tab and use it in your program. The classroom summary and the child summary have had the same changes. I'm pretty excited about these because before you only had a year-to-date view. So you knew that it was occurring. So you knew what that behavior was up year-to-date for that classroom, but it was a little bit harder to see how that looked like over time. And so now you've got this all in one place where you can see, well, for my classroom number, I'll just pick 5, how many incidents do I have, and what does that look like over time? You can see for this classroom, most incidents occur on Fridays, but you can also see that, is that consistent over time? Has it always been on Fridays, or is this something new that it's on Fridays? The same thing with the behavior. Inconsolable crying, that's our most frequent behavior in this classroom. And then we can look to see, is that, how does that look like over time? So you're getting 2 different different ways to look at data here at the year to date, but also over time. And then you're able to, again, use any of these filters to dig a little bit deeper into your data. So I really like this tab because it's a wonderful way to share data with teachers. If you're a coach and you're looking at data and you're sharing this with teacher, let's look at, we were focusing on this. Let's go ahead and take a look at that and see what that looks like over time if we're working on a specific goal. So this is really great for sharing data with teachers is this new classroom summary. The child summary has these same setup. So you're still able to see year to date, and you're able to see this over time. So what does that look like over time? And the same filters as well. So, and just like before, you can get the notes for each incident for that child as well. So you've got a lot of information in this one summary tab that will be really helpful for teams, for teachers, and sharing with families. The profiles have remained the same. So I made that one easier, but they all kind of remain the same. So you've got all of the metrics to see if there are any discrepancies in incident frequency. Are more children receiving a BIR than what we would expect? Are we seeing disproportionality for that? And so you're getting all of this data. It's still the same. You still have that's being calculated for you, and you have your statements that accompany all of those measures. And then at the bottom, you still have your bar charts that you can look at as well with your year to date. So we still have all of those profiles at the end for incident frequency, for in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, and dismissal. So if you have been using the BIR before, you'll probably breathe a sigh of relief that it hasn't changed that much. It's just a few of the changes that we think will really help you. And Megan's going to walk through how we think that you can use these new updates to look at your data.
All right, thanks, Myrna, for walking this through. And you're always so eloquent in describing updates and changes and talking through all things Excel. I know that everyone appreciates it. So one of the biggest benefits of using the updated BIRS is about supporting effective teaming around the use of data. So it's not just about collecting the data and entering the data, but using the data and making sure that our leadership teams have the right data at the right time and in a format that works for them. And so as Myrna described, there are lots of ways we can look at the data, lots of different charts, graphs, visualizations. We want to make decisions that have positive outcomes on classrooms and children. And one of the biggest changes, the analysis by category tab that Myrna walked us through, really allows our programs, and whether it's coaches, behavior support, our entire leadership teams, the ability to have a better understanding of what's happening. So the kind of primary understanding of behavior to getting very precise. And it's so much easier to problem solve when we have precision. Looking at the big picture around behavior only gets us so far when we're thinking about what can our leadership team problem solve around. And so we want to look at our data and wonder about those additional things we want to know. What additional context is important? What do we still want to know? And so we're going to be thinking about how can we use those new changes to really answer the questions that our leadership teams might have around behavior. So we're going to kind of walk through pulling out some of the examples that Myrna walked us through in the Excel spreadsheet. If I'm a program and I have this kind of big picture of what's happening in my program, so I'm looking at my data for my program and I see, okay, physical aggression is the behavior that's occurring most frequently. I immediately start wanting to know more. This isn't something I can't problem solve or change anything for our classrooms, for our program, for our children beyond I need to know more. And so we work in this drill down fashion where we use those filters that are built into the spreadsheet to get to precision statements so that we can have improved outcomes. So as Myrna said, when we looked at physical aggression, we noticed that it was occurring mostly in centers indoor play. Doesn't mean all the physical aggression is happening, but I can start narrowing that focus down so that as a leadership team, or maybe if I'm a coach, I can think, okay, I might have some influence over what happens in centers indoor play as a leadership team. I might be able to problem solve around what's happening during centers indoor play. So we use those filters and we try to understand the data better. And so we gather that data. So we go through the data and we think, okay, we have physical aggression. It's happening during centers indoor play. It's predominantly happening with peers, and that kind of makes sense if we're thinking about young children in play during center time. And then we think, okay, well, what's happening? What's the motivation? What might their behavior be communicating? And we see that there's a range of motivations, but there's this, I want to obtain items. That makes sense in play. Maybe I want the toy that you're playing with, or I want to gain your attention during play. So we look at that data and we think, okay, how are teachers responding? We see that for the majority of responses with physical aggression in centers indoor play, our teachers are reteaching, practicing expected behavior. But I'm always scanning. This is something that we guide programs to always be looking for those things that are alerting or a notice that are occurring that might be exclusionary or harmful. So I'm noticing things like, okay, we have some physical hold to restrain occurring around challenging behavior in centers indoor play. I'm looking at my administrative response. Many are not applicable, but we do have one that I see, oh, a child was sent home for 1 or more days. So we gather all this data and we try to make sense of it in what we call precision statements. It feels like something where our team, if we started with just physical aggression as occurring in our program, to something that maybe we can problem solve around. So we get the statement, BIRs are most commonly completed for physical aggression in centers indoor play with peers to obtain desired items, and teachers respond by reteaching, practicing the expected behavior. The most common response is it's not applicable. There isn't a common adult response, but we do note that there's a suspension. There was a child who was sent home for 1 or more days. So I get this statement and I immediately want to go back to my data. I want to know more. I want to know maybe what's happening around that exclusionary practice. I want to start problem solving around that precision statement. And the addition of that exclusionary practice tab, it seems minor, just adding a tab, but it is so powerful to be able to look and easily see, as Myrna described, what's happening. So it's not just enough to identify. If I know exclusionary practices and exclusionary discipline are occurring, I want to be able to make changes and action plan within my program. And so we can look at this data, we can look at it across time and look to see, are there trends, are there certain months in which those exclusionary discipline practices are happening. We can see which practice occurs across kind of time. So I'm visually drawn, I look at this, I'm noticing time in a different classroom or adult outside of classroom is something that happens across time, across program year. And then we can easily see who are those children that we need to talk about, to have discussions, to be thinking, are there some things that we can do differently so that we don't have continued exclusionary practices occurring? And so we think of, we might be thinking, okay, can we problem solve, or what can we be thinking about for child 4 and child 17? And we're going to come back and make those children part of our ongoing discussion. And using data in a team is how we get to that place from identifying something in our program that I want to problem solve to being able to action plan around that data. And we are very excited to share this tool that comes to us from colleagues in Michigan from their MTSS Technical Assistance Center. They developed this EC Behavior Incident Report Team Worksheet. This is a resource that is included in the webinar. When you signed up, it was one of the handouts for the webinar. It's also posted on our NCPMI's website for anyone to use. So we are so grateful for those professionals out there who are so willing to share their work, because this tool is phenomenal. And it is a worksheet that takes you through the teaming process using your behavior incident data. And it's laid out in a format that is so easy to follow and makes such logical sense for how we can go from identifying our problem all the way to how can we implement and put a plan in place. And if you're familiar with the data process that we often refer to, or we use in NCPMI, we talk about look, think, act process. We look at our data, we think about the data, and we dig deeper and ask questions, and then we make actions based on that data. It follows that process. So it aligns with probably the process you're already using for looking at your BIR data. But it starts with identifying the problem by creating precision statements. We just kind of walked through briefly what that looks like for a program. And then we spend time in problem analysis. That's the why. I think this is I know that I'm often one who I want to jump to actions and don't spend as much time in problem analysis. And this tool keeps you there with some really nice prompts that we're going to go over for thinking about why this is occurring in the program. It has a place where you are creating a plan, you're taking actions, and then a place that we're monitoring our plan and evaluating the outcome. So this teaming worksheet guides you through that process. I encourage you to look at it, to share with your leadership teams. And one of the nicest features in that teaming worksheet is the ability to reflect. So we think reflection is such an important part of this process of thinking about why is the problem happening. And the worksheet prompts you to think, why is the problem happening? Is it related to, or which pyramid model practice is our precision statement most directly connected to? And so we don't look at just BIR data in a vacuum. It's not the only piece of data we have in our pyramid model implementation. And so we're thinking about our nurturing and responsive relationships. What, are we creating a caring community? Do we have positive attention to all the children in our classrooms? Are we engaging in supportive conversations and building relationships? What do our high quality supports and environments say? You know, are we using daily schedules in the classroom? Are we helping children learn their steps of routines? Do we have the ability to teach strong, clear transitions for children? Are we providing directions, teaching behavior expectations? So all of those things are so critical to be thinking about because they definitely influence behavior in the classroom. And then where are we at in terms of teaching social emotional skills? And so if we think back to the example of the precision statement that we looked at, there might be environmental features that we want to look at. So are we teaching children the steps of the center play routine? Are we teaching social emotional skills? So if I want to get an item during center play, or I want to ask a friend to play, or I want to say to a child, I don't want to play right now, but maybe later, we can look at what are our TPOT scores telling us about implementation of these practices. Do we need more professional development or coaching supports? Have all teachers been trained on these effective practices? So it helps bring it back to our system. And that is the next question, is why is the problem happening? Is it about something in our system? What critical element of the pyramid model system might be contributing? So that worksheet walks you through and you think about, do we have effective leadership strategies built in? What's our staff buy-in for implementation of pyramid model? Are we teaching program-wide expectations? Always thinking about our coaching and our teacher support for our practitioner support for implementing practices. Do they have support resources? Do they have access to a coach who can support them? Do we have procedures? Are we being consistent in our responses to challenging behavior? All those things where if we're not following that problem-solving process, we might be missing something that's really helpful and essential for our team to plan. And so this worksheet, I could go on and on about how wonderful this teaming worksheet is, but we wanted to give you an introduction. We encourage you to explore it, bring it back to your leadership teams as a way that you can look at your BIR data and get to actions. Because as Myrna talked about, identifying an exclusionary practice, we don't want it to stop there. We want to be able to think about what's next and what can we do to improve outcomes for children, for our teachers, for our program, for the families that we support. So that worksheet is available on our website, but you also might be wondering where you can find all of the BIR information that we have at NCPMI. So Myrna's gonna kind of walk us through how you can access these new updated materials.
All right. So for those of you who have downloaded materials before, you'll know exactly where to go. But for those of you who are new or just haven't been to our website in a little while, the web address is challengingbehavior.org. You'll want to go to the implementation tab. And from the implementation tab, there is the data decision making that on the drop down. And once you get to data decision making, you'll want to go to the second tab that has the behavior incident report system. So it isn't in the accordions for all of the data tools, but you'll have to click on that tab. Once you click on that tab, it'll take you to a new page where it'll give you a couple of things that you can just download. So one of them is the BIR overview. So if you want to use this in your program and you want everyone to, get this kind of like, what is the BIR? That's a great handout to use. We have the readiness checklist. So if you're thinking about using the BIR but aren't sure how to start, or if you're ready to use the BIR, the readiness checklist is a great resource. We have the handout that Megan just walked us through, so you can download that as well for your team meetings. And then a frequently asked questions document, which we recently updated as well. So you can download those kind of right off of the web. Then the rest of the materials are in a package, so they are in a zip file. So you're going to get a blank version of the BIR Excel workbook. So that's yours. I don't get your data. That stays wherever you save it. Just don't save it in Google Drive, then it won't work. So the BIR version 3.0, you'll get a blank version and you'll get a demo version. So I also provide the demo version so that if you want to demonstrate to your leadership team how you can use the BIR, or you want to use it for training, you've already got a demo version that has data in it that you can play around with and get familiar with how you would use the system. It includes a PDF of the BIR form, so you can download that and use that in your program. You can put your logo on there if you want to, but the PDF of the form is included. You'll have the report and instruction, the BIR instructions document. So that document at the very top has the 1-hour training for teachers. And so on how and when to fill out a BIR. So it has a link to that video. And then it has all of the operational definitions of everything that's on the form. That was not updated. So if you've already got that, then you're set with that. The data decision-making guide, that was not updated. It is in the future. We are going to figure out how we make that something that's really helpful and useful for teams, but it is still there. The data entry guide was updated, so your data entry person has a new, not only do they have the video, but if they like to just follow along on a document, there is a Word document to accompany how you would do data entry. You have a handout about what every teacher wants to know about BIR. So if you're sharing with your teachers, why are we collecting BIR? What do you do with these data? That's a great handout. And then a staff buy-in presentation. So a PowerPoint, if you want to take this back to your program and kind of go through what the BIR is and how we're going to use it in our program. If you scroll down, then there will be a form that you need to fill out. I promise you, I won't be sending you a million emails. It's just if there are any updates to the system. With any system, sometimes there's things that might need to be revised at some point. And so if anything like that happens, I will send out an email to all of you who've downloaded it, let you know, hey, there's an updated version. so that you are aware of that. So that's the only reason we ask for your information, and maybe any surveys that we might have regarding the BIR. So once you do that, you fill that in, you're going to get an email that will give you the link to download the zip file that has all of these materials in it. If you have any issues with that, then you definitely reach out to us. And so now we have Q&A. I see that there are a couple of questions.
We do have some questions.
So yeah, Megan.
I'll ask you, Myrna, the first question. Well, I'm going to take the one that I know that I can answer, and I'm going to give you the PIDS questions. So one of the questions asked was, should we use the paper form to complete the behavior incident or input the information directly into the system? Our spreadsheet, we encourage you to always use the version of the paper version of the form for teachers to accurately capture that data. They can do it at their convenience. They don't have to be at their computer. They can complete that form, and then it gets entered by a data entry. Whoever that person is in your program identified to do data entry gets entered. We recommend on a weekly basis that data gets inputted. So it's not an electronic input system that goes on an online system. We use that paper form that in our version of the system is the Excel spreadsheet. So it's a great question. There are a few questions, Myrna, about using the Pyramid Information Data System, PIDS, which is also a system that many states have access to around they're all pyramid model implementation data tools. And so there are questions around, are these changes going to also occur in PIDS? And I think the questions were around the form, will the data entry be there, around changes to demographics, and then changes around maybe some different visualizations, how the changes have been updated in the NCPMI version. I'm going to give that one to you, Myrna. You're our PIDS. You're very knowledgeable.
So those are great questions. The good news is that, yes, so I've already been in contact with Summer about the changes to the PIDS to follow what we've done here with the Excel. The good news is that a lot of the things that we added to the Excel were already features in PIDS. So you already had access to a lot of these filters that were already part of PIDS. Some of those changes, like the exclusionary discipline report, they did take those, and so I think they're working on them as far as adding that as an additional report for the BIR module. They are also going to add that Middle Eastern North African race category. As those of you who do use PIDS are familiar, they already had a prefer not to respond or other category. So that's not necessarily something new. And then the other things like filters and things like that, like I said, are already part of the system. But those things that are different, they are aware of the changes, and I think they will be making those changes in the PIDS in the near future. Great question.
And those were we had two questions about PIDS, and then the question about using the form. And
there's another
Is there
another question in the chat about is it realistic and possible for the coach to use this who is also responsible for behavior challenges? I love all the data, just seems like a lot of data entry. I think one of the things too that we did develop was the Google form. So if your teachers do have access to an iPad or a device in the classroom, there is a Google form where they can enter data. And in that case, you can enter data using your device into Google Forms. And then from Google Forms, you would copy and paste that data into the Excel workbook. If you're interested in that, I have that set up. I have a document that you can use and follow the instructions to add that to your Google Drive. You just email me directly.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. As you're thinking about, it is a lot. I mean, it is a lot of data entry, and you hear us talk about teaming, and it really does. It is most effective when it's used and kind of adopted by a program, so that it's a shared responsibility of buy-in from teachers around data collection, that we have the support for data entry, and we have support for someone who might be the person who's sharing graphs and charts and helping the rest of the leadership team to kind of understand, so that those providing behavior support and supporting teachers through that coaching have you're all in this together in terms of using the system, that it's not relying on one person. I see that we might have one more question in the Q&A, Myrna, that just popped up. Yeah, have we used this in childcare settings? That's a wonderful question. And yes, we have programs that use the BIR in childcare, and they are able to offer teacher training and support on how to use the BIR, and they're able to figure that data entry role out and use that data on a consistent basis to really make those good decisions and use that data on an ongoing basis. So we have programs, childcare programs, public pre-K programs that are using the BIR system. I don't know, Myrna, if you have any other additions on that piece, but.
Yeah, no, I did see Deborah's comment,
Oh, yeah.
Fitzgerald, about the data collector role. So that's a very specific role within PITS that allows the teacher to enter their own data. And so that also helps with responsibility, unlike the Excel where you should, I say limited to one person who's entering data. When you have the online system, you have more flexibility as far as sharing that role with others and kind of doing it simultaneously. Thank you, Deborah, for that comment.
All right, Victor, we're going to turn it over to you for the end of our webinar today.
All right. Well, thank you all very much to all of our panelists for their wonderful insights. Your feedback is very important to the work that we do. Please remember to provide your feedback on this webinar with our post-webinar survey by typing the web address shown on this slide into your internet browser. Your certificate of attendance will appear once you submit the survey. We invite you to visit our website, challengingbehavior.org, to sign up for upcoming webinars, access recordings, download pyramid model resources, and more. Thank you to our funder for making this webinar possible. This concludes our webinar. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.